Welcome to the Phoenix Conversations, second chances, fresh starts and powerful new chapters. I'm Lucy McCarraher, author, speaker and podcast host, and each week I explore with men and women the many ways they have reinvented their lives after life changes big and small, or simply the feeling that life is asking something new of them. Whether this is the first time you've listened to this podcast or you're a regular listener, if you haven't already, I would really appreciate it if you'd hit follow and subscribe. Today, I'm talking to Jeannie McGillivray, or McGillivray. She has one of those unpronounceable names like me. Jeannie had a working-class childhood and left school without the advantages or connections that often open doors, yet she still managed to build her career in technology before going on to establish and lead several businesses. She's the co-founder and CEO of Remote, a custom software company, and the co-founder of Autm, an AI-native operational intelligence platform designed to help organizations connect their systems, retain knowledge, and put AI to work safely and effectively. And all of this with a background in the arts and being a qualified medical herbalist. Hello, Jeannie. Welcome to the Phoenix Conversations. It's lovely to have you here.
Oh, Lucy, thank you so much for having me. I'm absolutely delighted to join. I've watched a few episodes and I love the series that you're producing. It's such an interesting subject, so I'm delighted to contribute in any way I can.
Well, I'm sure this is going to be another very interesting conversation. So, Jeannie, I always start by asking people to go back to the very beginning. So, what was childhood like for you? What were you like as a child? And did you have any kind of ambitions or something you wanted to be when you grew up?
Yeah, so I had an unusual, in some senses, childhood in that my siblings were 15 and 13 years older than me. So I was born in a different phase of my parents' life. They were very young, sort of early 20s when they had my brother and sister. And then my mum was 35 when she had me, and I had very grown up siblings. So I remember my sister as an 18-year-old. So in some senses, I felt like I was an only child with two sets of parents. I was very close to my siblings in that way. They were very protective and loving. So I had a very loving childhood, but a very objective view as well of my family, because they were a family unit for a long time before I was born. So they had very close sibling relationships that I wasn't part of. I had a very different relationship with each of them, but I also was very kind of loved and looked after. So I would say I had a very happy childhood in a very working class family. Yeah, I remember I was very loving as a child. So I used to travel about in the middle of the night trying to get in bed with somebody that wouldn't wake up as I was climbing in with them. I grew up with very working class values and principles. My dad was a real Labour man and a Labour voter, and very proud to have those sort of values to bring us all up to be resilient and work hard and all of that kind of stuff. But my dad also, when I was quite a young child, he had his own business. He worked for a company in London and then he bought the Anglia region. He was a vending engineer. And so it was very entrepreneurial. I remember really clearly him trying to build up the business and going with him in the holidays on his route that he did. And he also employed my brother. So I remember very clearly them making a decision to make it a family business and have his first employee. In terms of ambition, I think my ambition was kind of limited to my experience. I wanted to be a hairdresser because that was the most creative and kind of aspirational first experience. Then I wanted to be an interior designer. And then I met a very formative teacher in my senior school years who had worked for Jean Muir. She was in textiles, Mrs. Gorman. And she really gave me a feeling that I could go and pursue whatever I wanted to do, and that I shouldn't let society or being female prevent me from wanting to go and do things. She was a really meaningfully impactful and influential figure on my my ambitions and things.
So interesting. And so where did that take you, in fact? And what did your family think of it when you moved to the next stage of college, university, whatever it was?
So it was interesting because I loved art. I was very aesthetic, very visually aesthetic person, and very interested in spirituality. And so I loved how artists like Joseph Beuys and Bill Viola expressed their inner workings through art and their spirituality through art. But I didn't have a particularly religious family. But I decided I wanted to go and do art at degree level. I was the first in I was lucky because there were grants in those days. And my dad do what I wanted to do, but also to take responsibility for my decisions, whether that was earning my money, going through school. I used to put market stalls up before school. I worked on the jewellery stall on a Saturday. I worked in a clothes shop. So I had he wouldn't let me have a paper round because it was too dangerous and he didn't like strangers. But I did other things. And then going through uni, I was the first to go to uni. I did go and study art, but I had a grant, which made it really doable. And my parents paid my rent. And then I had lots of jobs working for the student union. I even cleaned the loos. I worked in pubs to just pay my way through this degree that I wanted to go and do.
That sounds to me as if you kind of reinvented yourself out of your family background in a way. I mean, this sounds like an odd way to say it, but that you really worked at becoming a different sort of person in a way than the rest of your family, and really worked for it and worked at it, which is very impressive. So
yeah.
You finished your degree. Where did you take that art?
So I worked for the student union for a year. I was a vice president of the student union. So that was a gentle introduction into sort of employment from university. And then after that year, I really wanted to learn an employable craft. I really felt that fine art was difficult, really difficult road. So I went and met up with lots of different furniture makers and cabinet makers and ceramicists. I wanted to go and do an apprenticeship. And I found it difficult to find somebody whose work I really loved. And I had been working with a really dear lady who became a dear friend. Her name's Mariel Hoare. And she ran really fascinating life drawing classes. She trained with Oskar Kokoschka. And then there was a guy called Cecil Collins who taught her a way of expressing your spirituality through art, which was what I was interested in originally. She taught a very specific way of drawing that was really creative. And so I was traveling around the UK with her, being her life model and helping her run the classes. She was very much the figurehead of the whole thing. And I was very much a supporting role. I went up to her house, and one weekend the life drawing classes were cancelled, and her son lived next door, and he was a very famous potter called Rupert Spira. And instead of running the life drawing weekend, I went and helped Rupert pack up his pottery. He was moving to Shropshire, and at the end of the weekend I said, "Can I come and be your apprentice?" And he said yes. And I was living with my now husband Paul at the time in Brighton, and I kind of went home and said, "I'm moving to Shropshire." And he was like, "Where on earth is Shropshire?" But I moved to Shropshire, and we had a long-term relationship. He commuted back and forth at weekends, and I went with the intention of learning ceramics, but I actually learnt more aesthetics, attention to detail, and running the pottery from an order to what gets thrown, what gets fired, what gets glazed, and then all the way to boxing up. So I actually learned more how to kind of run the pottery, and I was terrible at actually throwing. But he taught me so many life skills during that time.
Sounds like an extraordinary reinvention. I mean, I'm incredibly impressed that you just kind of went back to Paul, your partner, then, and said, "I'm moving to Shropshire." That's a really kind of positive, strong thing to do.
Yeah,
and it was
it was really hard because Rupert had just moved to Shropshire. The pottery was in barns that had no windows. And I joined in April, so I did a full April to April. So during the winter, it was incredibly harsh. And, there were times I'd just go home and cry because I just felt so lonely and it just felt like such hard work. And I was very much on my own. But I think because of my upbringing, I had this view that I needed to be resilient and take responsibility for myself, be accountable for myself. I remember my dad had so many phrases, like he would always say, never borrow money, never get into debt. I know now that there are ways, intelligent ways of borrowing money to grow wealth, but it was very much that working class aesthetic, or worldview of just working really hard, doing what you need to do to make your way in life. And he never had a prejudice about me being a female. He definitely really wanted me to be made of like stern stuff and go out there and do what I need to do. And university had really opened my worldview of meeting different people, different lifestyles, different diets, people that had money, all of those things I'd never experienced before.
What you did was take on the business side of it and the entrepreneurial side of the pottery, which, given your whole life journey, goes through what you do. You actually take things and make them work. So,
Yeah.
Jeannie, you were there, I think, did you say you were there for a year? And then what happened at the end of that year?
And then I fell pregnant with our daughter, Ella, who's now 28. And it was very much a decision with me and Paul, do I move back to Brighton or does he come to Shropshire? And really, we made the choice for him to come to Shropshire because it's a beautiful place to be a child. And we knew that it would give Ella a really good childhood. She'd grow up close to nature and in a very kind of traditional community, very inclusive community, the loving community where you have very much an active role in the community. So we decided that Paul who was in a hip hop band at the time, trying to make his way as a musician, would come and move to the middle of nowhere and we'd start a family together.
So did you stay on at the pottery then? Paul moved so you could continue that job?
No, he moved to Shropshire and we wanted to work out what we wanted to do in life. We got part-time jobs in the local Whole Food shop. We worked in Harvest Whole Foods while I was pregnant and for a short time after Ella was born. And then we decided to start a record label, and because Paul was a musician, and we got a Prince's Youth Business Trust grant and loan. And we set out to make a name for ourselves in the music industry, with me sort of running the record label and Paul being very involved with all the artists. And after a year of trying to get a record label off the ground, we'd got ourselves a distribution deal with Universal Records. And, we had artists on the roster and all of that kind of stuff. But after a year, we just completely ran out of our grant and loan from the Prince's Trust. We'd gone away for the weekend. And when we came back, I said to Paul, we really need to understand what this internet thing is. You're going to need to learn and build us a website. And so he went and bought a copy of .NET magazine that had Dreamweaver on the cover. And he set about making a website for the record label. And Hip Hop Connection magazine came to interview us. And they said, you've got a website, can you make us one? And then his dad wanted one. And then the local newspaper, Positive News, wanted one. And we just kind of fell into making websites right at the beginning. And the business is still called Remote Recordings Limited. We trade as remote in that business, but that's how it happened. We just needed the money. He was good at it. I was doing the design work. So I was doing the kind of design of them and he was building them. But because he'd studied computers, he'd started writing his own computer programs aged 8. And I was so interested in aesthetics and design. It was a really natural marriage of our skills. And we found that we could make a really good living from doing that. And we kind of fell into it as a young couple with a little one. Yeah.
Goodness, that is quite extraordinary reinvention. What happened to the record label? Did it quietly fade away?
It kind of did, except we kind of resurrected the whole idea about 10 years ago, and we started a record label called Cold Hill Records, and we have released a number of recordings under that. And actually our daughter, she's our creative director during the week. She works for us Monday to Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, she's gigging all over Europe. She's a very accomplished and resilient, well-known music producer called EJ Akin, and her band is called Grove. And she's currently supporting Skunk Anansie in an arena tour all around Europe with Grove. So the music side of things and the creative side of things is still very much part of the family.
That's a great story. And I'm really interested in the way that your family, from your kind of origin family, sort of reinvents itself in kind of quite, sort of subtle ways. There's, things that everybody cares about go through the family and come out in different forms that you hadn't expected.
I think that sort of goes back to our spiritual beliefs, in that we feel that life is creative. And so we have goals and aspirations and plans, but we also have an understanding that when opportunities or intuitions present themselves, that to follow through. And the only thing that can prevent you from doing things is your own fears. And so if you feel that fear and you do it anyway, you might fear rejection or embarrassment or failure, whatever the fear might be. That's the worst that can happen, is your experience of failure, rejection, and so on. And so we try very hard to do the thing, and then without our fears stopping us from doing it, and then see what happens from there.
It seems to have been very successful as far as I can see. So we've got to the website creation business. Was that what you did for some time, or did it keep developing into other things?
So it kept developing. So we started off creating websites, and some ex-boyfriend from college approached us to create a portal for homeopaths. He'd got some investment. He'd been to a few other agencies that said it couldn't be done. And he wanted to create a portal where practitioners could log in and they could build a case. So they could add a series of symptoms and build a case on whatever the presenting condition was. And he had raw text files of what are called the materia medica, which were written by all different people. So there was no pattern in the text, but he'd converted them to raw text files. And he called me one day and said, "Can you do it?" And I said, "Definitely, we can do it." And he said, "How much would it be?" And I said, £10,000, because that seemed like a lot of money. And he went, "Okay, so that's for the front end. What about for the back end?" And I went, £10,000. So I then told Paul that I accepted this impossible job. We went to Waterstones and he bought kind of .NET for dummies and SQL for beginners. And that's what pivoted us from a website company to a software company. And he learned how to do relational database, object-oriented programming. He totally taught himself. And we did this massive portal. And it was really the beginning then of transitioning from a web company to a software company, our own content management system. It meant that when Wix and those Squarespace and those kind of companies came along, we were already not doing brochure websites. We were already doing more complicated software. And then before we knew it, we needed to employ somebody. So we got our first employee. But the real change came that because we'd done that project, we then got a big project for Volkswagen Group. And that was our first brand. They were looking for somebody to run their stock count system. And my cousin recommended us. We turned up. Paul had designed the system that they were looking for on a roll of wallpaper lining paper. We turned up to Volkswagen Group's headquarters in Milton Keynes with the system drawn out on wallpaper lining paper. They said, "How do you know you could do it?" And we said, "Because we've worked it all out and here it is." And we rolled out this wallpaper lining paper on the boardroom and we showed them how it'd work. And they were like, "That's brilliant." And we got the job, and we were competing against SAP for that job. And we did it for 15 years after that.
That's extraordinary. And that you won the job because you had the wallpaper, the lining paper.
Exactly, because they'd acquired brands, and the problem was they needed every dealership across all their brands to log in and declare the vehicles they got on their forecourts. But it was Audi, Seat, Skoda, Volkswagen, Europcar, all their ports, all their manufacturing facilities, and they all kept the data in different formats. So it was similar to the homeopathic project. And we worked out a system of how they would pass it down the brands to get everybody to upload it, and then how we would transform the data. And then it compared it with their internal SAP system, was audited by PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then submitted to HMRC as their annual stock count. So that was a huge turning point. It meant that we had our first big brand, which made us then credible. And we later worked for Sony and Volkswagen and Volvo and Tesco. And that was a really pivotal moment for us as well. We went from me and Paul and one employee to a small team of 5 at that time.
Did you work that whole system out together, you and Paul, or was it him doing the kind of the stuff and you doing the business and the graphics, the aesthetic as you had before, or was it all kind of intertwined?
It kind of changed. We'd started to work with freelance designers because they were much better than me. They were much more formally trained specifically in web design. And it changed to me understanding the requirement and really building a business requirements document. So understanding what we would need to do. And then Paul working out how we could do that. So he's very he sees systems in his head. So the whole idea of how would we get all the brands to log in? How would we transform all that data? How could that, what would the database and the architecture be? He sees that almost instantly, but he just needs to know what they need. And that seems to be my sort of forte. I go, right, it would need to do this, it would need to do that, it would need to do this. And then Paul translates that into how would that be built.
That's an incredibly brilliant partnership and just extraordinary that you developed from accidentally small beginnings, the website idea, to doing something so expansive and innovative as well.
Yeah. And I remember somebody saying to us, one of the designers that we employed at the time saying to us, nobody will ever pay more than £250 for a website. And I remember just not believing them. And I think it was that disbelief in somebody else's limiting beliefs, because that person really believed that made me go, and Paul actually go, no, that's not true. They definitely will. We've gone on to build applications that cost £300,000 for, or more, much larger applications. And I think at our height, we were a team of 20. We scaled it back now because with AI, we don't need quite so many people, and what we're building has changed. But yeah, we were at one point a team of 20.
That's very interesting to know, because obviously AI has come in the last 5 years, perhaps, for people who've been working in that area longer than it's been kind of public and sort of individually available. So how has that changed how you work and where you've taken your business to, and how you integrate it?
Yeah. So I guess it's 2 things. We had started to build AI agents for ourselves because the projects had got bigger, and the investment from ourselves to write out the functional requirements and write the proposals got bigger and bigger and bigger and more demanding and more complex. And so we started to write agents that would listen to conversations like this, understand the business requirements, work out the whole system. So we taught it how we work, what our processes were, and all that kind of stuff. And then it would create the proposal and then scope out the project and cost it up into a spreadsheet. So Paul built that himself just from the pain of writing proposals. And we'd also written another one that just went through all our emails, marked the important ones, marked the ones that needed action, and anything that we needed to know or understand. So it would sort out all our emails. The other thing was that we'd completed the KPI program, Daniel Priest's KPI program, which is where we met you, Lucy. And we'd always had an aspiration to have a product. We knew that these projects, no matter how big they were, it was always feast and famine. We were always trying to find the next one and the next one and the next one. And we knew it was not scalable unless we added more people. So we really wanted some recurring revenue. And we had hosting and support and maintenance agreements and that kind of stuff. But it wasn't really scalable. It was always the number of projects in, and that was governed by the number of people. So it just felt limiting. And Shah Wasmond, who was our mentor at the time, said, would you come and show my mastermind how to make AI agents? And we did. We went down to run a workshop, and in the morning we showed them the AI landscape, Lindy and NA10 and Reclaim and all the bells and whistles, all the shiny things they could put into their business. And in the afternoon, we intended to show them how to make AI agents themselves using those platforms. But only 2 people in the whole mastermind really got it. One was Donna O'Toole, actually, who has a computer background, and another one was a VA. But everyone else, all the kind of founders and entrepreneurs, were just like, oh, I hate it. They couldn't keep up with the steps, didn't get it, and shut their laptops and just said, can I pay you to do it? But we didn't want to set up another agency. So we got in the car and we were like, was that a success or a terrible failure, that workshop? And it was kind of both. But I said to Paul, there must be a way that we can write a platform where they don't need technical knowledge. They can just use natural language and set up the workflows. And Paul got his laptop out the boot. We had a 3.5-hour journey, and we spent the journey home going, right, it would need to connect to all their systems. It would need to have like a ChatGPT interface. It would need to understand the context of their business. So their people, their projects, their money, decisions, intent, all of that kind of stuff. And we've spent the last year making it. And it's called Autm, Autm.ai. And we're actually launching it. We've come out of beta today. So it's been a very difficult project, much more difficult than we anticipated. And we probably wouldn't have done it honestly if we'd have known how difficult it was going to be. But we have managed to build a UK AI platform that puts all of our expertise from 26 years of building business operations systems and platforms into this one platform and make it available as a subscription-based system. So we have our first proper product and we're just about to scale it.
Congratulations. That's an extraordinary story. I mean, just to go back through your journey, you started off wanting to do arts and sort of reinventing yourself out of your typical family background. And then you took yourself off to run a pottery in Shropshire, kind of reinventing yourself out of what you were doing in Brighton and living with your partner there. And then you started a record label, a kind of another reinvention. And then out of that, you reinvented yourselves as a website design business, and then a more general kind of tech company. And now you've reinvented yourself as an extraordinary AI-based product. Who can use Autm? Who are you selling it to? Who's it useful for?
So it's when lines of communication become difficult. So when you've got a team of 10 or more and you've suddenly got lots of lines of communications, lots of spreadsheets, lots of systems, lots of fragmented data. So you've got emails, a CRM, Slack, spreadsheets, all of those things, and you've got all the information about whatever you're providing. So it might be products or your services or your projects, your customers, in all of those disparate systems. And getting information then becomes quite difficult, and there become dependencies. So somebody has to fill in this spreadsheet before somebody else can do this thing. And what happened was people were subscribing to lots and lots of SaaS platforms. So they might have Asana or Trello and Slack and G Suite or the Microsoft Suite. So all of these subscriptions become quite expensive, but they are also limiting in that you have to transfer data from one place into another place, and it throttles growth. Autm sits above that. It's like an operations intelligence layer, and it understands everything that's happening in that business. And you can say to it, what decision did we make about that? How many leads have we had in this month? Where are we at with this project? Has everybody done what they said they'd do at the last meeting? Because it kind of observes everything, contextually understands it, and then can give you information or can carry out tasks for you. So you can get it to send you a weekly management report, or you can, I've got it at the moment doing deep research into agentic AI, specifically around business process systems and workflow systems, and give me a weekly update on what's happened in the landscape, write a blog post, write social media posts, and email it to me every Thursday. So it can do all sorts of amazing things.
It's definitely beyond my pay grade to understand how it works, but it does sound like an extraordinary tool. And
it has a long-term memory, so it brings all the information together and then can orchestrate different elements of your business, recommend optimizations and better ways of doing things. But the kind of the grand plan is that over time, you perhaps wouldn't need a task manager because actually all the tasks and all the context are in Autumn. So over time, the sort of dastardly plan is that people wouldn't need to maintain so many subscriptions.
So where do you now see yourself going? It seems to me that the thread sort of running through your life of reinventions is that you take opportunities as they come. As you've said, that's your belief, that's what, the world is offering you, and it's your kind of job is to take them and make the most of them. So this is obviously a huge kind of piece of work that you're doing, and given the pace of technology and AI is going to require you to keep developing with that. Do you have a vision of where the next phase is going to be, what it's going to look like for you?
We do. So we do for the platform and for ourselves as, I guess, leaders in the company. And we're at the precipice of both. So the first one for Autumn is to make it truly intelligent so that it can actually anticipate what's going to happen and make recommendations. So at the moment, you ask it to do things in natural language and it can set it all up, orchestrating all the systems you're using for you. But the aim really is for it to analyze how all the businesses are running and make recommendations and make enhancements itself. We always want the human to be in the loop, but we're just one step away from it being truly intelligent so that it can actually suggest and execute its own recommendations. That's where the product's going. And for us, we've spent 26 years making products. So we're very, very good at it. And we keep slipping down that kind of neurological pathway of making the product more and more brilliant. But what we learned on KPI was that it needs a figurehead. So we now need to implement everything that we learned on the KPI program and actually step out. And our new evolution will be to be the key people of influence in our industry. We've got a meeting this afternoon to start to execute formally our go-to-market strategy, which involves us stepping out of our comfort zone of being behind the scenes and making the things into stepping into, and we're finding it really difficult, have to make a very conscious decision to do the things that you don't ordinarily do every day and make them part of who you are and what you do. And that's what we're about to undertake.
It's fascinating. So this will be your next reinvention, you as those figureheads. Fantastic. Yeah. So Jeannie, finally, you have just taken opportunities as they've come to you, and they have come to you in remarkable ways and fascinating ways. If there's somebody out there listening at the moment who is being offered an opportunity but is actually quite scared to take it, to make that step and that reinvention, what would your one piece of advice be to them?
There's an amazing phrase. It's attributed to Goethe, but I'm not sure it was written by him, but I'm going to paraphrase it to make it easy to understand. But it's whatever you dream you can do or think you can, begin it now. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. And that would be my one piece of advice. Begin it. You never know whether you can do something or not until you begin it. And until you begin it, it has no value, even if it's the best idea in the world. If you don't start, whether that's asking for a promotion or leaving a corporate role or whatever you dream for yourself that you can do, begin it now. Because it's magic.
Brilliant advice. Jeannie, thank you so much for this fascinating conversation and telling us about your extraordinary journey, and all the very best with launching Autumn and yourselves.
Thank you. My pleasure, Lucy. Thank you so much. I'm glad I asked you for this interview. I'd seen the conversations you were having. I think it's a magical conversation to have, and it really brings in the full potential of who a person could be. So it's been a pleasure and an honour to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. Your story with all its multiple reinventions within reinventions. I loved our conversation, which was both surprising and inspiring, and I look forward to seeing the progress of Autumn. For more inspiring reinvention stories, follow and subscribe now to the Phoenix Conversations on Spotify, Apple or YouTube, or maybe all three. You can connect with me on most social media platforms as long as you can spell my name. I am the only Lucy McCarraher, looks like McCarraher, on the internet, and I'd love to hear your reinvention story. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.